Lots of Tesla stock news today, a few really important updates, and we'll start with Giga Texas and then we'll move on to the big unexpected development. Tesla Giga Texas is halting production to upgrade and optimize assembly lines focused on producing the Cybertruck and the Model Y. I shared a rumor a few days ago that it would be shut down, and now we are seeing that it is happening. Generally, this has been the response from Tesla stock investors. Some are excited because this is another indication that the Cybertruck is coming soon, and perhaps that the Model Y will have better margins. Drive Tesla says, from what we have heard, production at Giga Texas stopped a few days ago and is expected to last a week to 10 days. You will want to pay attention here. This is translated from Spanish to English. Tesla suppliers are warned there is no rush. The tentative date that Tesla would start production at the Gigafactory in Santa Catarina in 2026 or 2027 is behind the decision of some Chinese suppliers to postpone expansion into this market, said one of the suppliers. Which means that the Gigafactory Mexico could be coming way later than initially expected. One Chinese supplier source said that they were recently told to wait on their plan to set up supporting production in Mexico 2 or 3 months ago. There was a lot of rush, lots of pressure to look for a location, but 1 month later, they told us to wait. The Mexican publication also consulted with Danish engineering consultancy firm Rambo to estimate the timeline to production based on their local permitting process, and the firm estimated that production would start in 2027 as opposed to 2025, which is what it was widely expected before. The comment from Electric says, I would take this report with a grain of salt as the sourcing is limited, but I wouldn't be surprised if it proves to be true. But the production in Giga Mexico could indeed start later than expected, maybe in 2026 or 2027, but this is not necessarily bad news. Take a look at what Troy says. It appears the idea was that Giga Mexico would take the lead and other factories in Europe and China would follow a year later. I think the original plan was to start production in early 2025, but Giga Mexico can't do that anymore because the permits are delayed. Therefore, it's likely that another factory will take the lead and Giga Mexico will follow a year later. I think the best choice would be to build a pioneer factory in China because it would be much quicker. We know that Tesla is capable of building a new factory in China in about 1 year. So if Tesla a few months ago already decided to pick a different location where it would first start producing the next generation vehicle, and let's say that happens to be in China, then a year from now, roughly, maybe a little bit more than that, Tesla could start producing the next generation vehicles there. So we could still see the next generation vehicle in 2025, just maybe not coming out from Mexico. Compact cars are much more popular in China and Europe than they are in the US or Canada, and that's why it does make sense to start not in the US first, but in the US, Tesla can get the $7,500 tax credits that make the cars much more affordable to consumers. And on top of that, if the batteries are produced, for example, in the US, then Tesla gets these additional battery credits that go directly to the bottom line, which is unlike the $7,500 credit, which goes to the consumer really and not to Tesla. But also, this whole thing sounds just a bit weird. If Tesla starts production in Giga Mexico at the end of 2025, the build out of this factory will have been the slowest build out ever. So you would think Tesla would be getting better at building factories, but this would prove to be the opposite of that. So that sort of doesn't really fully make sense. Of course, it's a completely new vehicle and everything has to be different, but you would think that Tesla would be getting better overall at building factories, or at least not getting worse in terms of the timelines. So I'm not sure that I'm buying into all of these rumors that Tesla is going to delay the factory by so much. If it is doing it, it's not because Tesla can't build the factory this quickly. I think it's mostly because Tesla just thinks that it's better to actually introduce the vehicle into a different market first. Here's an argument that would support that. Tesla has roughly a 60% market share in the US when we look at the EV market. If Tesla introduces the next generation vehicle into the US market, what do you think that would do to Tesla's market share? Perhaps it would go above 60%. And maybe the government wouldn't really like that. It's one thing to have, let's say, 70% market share when the market has just started growing. But it's another thing to have, let's say, 70% market share when already you are selling millions of vehicles per year and growing extremely fast. But I don't view this argument as a strong one because I think either way, Tesla's market share in the US for EV specifically is going to decline even if Tesla releases the next generation vehicle, because it's already so high. There are also two more very important things to really consider. Maybe they are talking about volume production. So if you are building prototypes and if you are building things in low volume, then maybe Tesla is able to get local suppliers to take care of everything. Maybe Tesla does not need these Chinese suppliers to build their shop in Mexico, or maybe Tesla can just get their things shipped from China directly initially, or from some places in the US. And maybe Tesla is just looking to cut out these suppliers because China has been pretty hostile in the recent days towards American companies. For example, China has banned all government employees from using Apple products. And now China seeks to broaden its iPhone ban to even state companies and other agencies. So maybe Tesla just says, all right, we need to diversify here. Chinese suppliers, we don't think we will really need you anymore. We're just gonna get someone else to help us. So keeping this in mind, this does not sound as bad anymore as it previously did. And maybe there's not going to be a huge delay. There could be still, but that's something I think to ask Elon directly on the earnings call. And now some good Tesla stock news. Tesla plans to install 20,000 electric vehicle charging stations across 2,000 Hilton properties in the US, Mexico, and Canada beginning next year. I think they meant charging connectors, 20,000 charging connectors. About a year ago, I stayed at a hotel and they only had 2 charging connectors and one did not fit Tesla. So there was really only one, and luckily it was available, but that made me worry a little bit because what if someone else just took it? And that charger only provided about 40 miles per hour, something like that. So not very slow, but not really super fast either. The Tesla Model Y was the second best-selling battery electric vehicle and the 6th best-selling car model overall in Germany in August. But it's a bit strange that Volkswagen ID4 and 5 right here are treated as one model. Maybe Tesla Model Y and Model 3 should also be treated as one model. Then last year, supposedly Tesla would have pretty much had the world's best-selling vehicle already. However, if you look at the year-to-date sales instead of looking at the August sales only, we won't even see the Volkswagen ID4 and 5 on this list. So the Germans can't even beat Tesla in their own country. We're not going to even talk about other countries such as Australia, where I can't even see where Volkswagen would be. This is pretty important. Tesla clarified during investor meetings in Munich that both production and deliveries will be down in Q3 due to planned factory shutdowns globally, Deutsche Bank analyst Rosner wrote in a report to clients Wednesday, so just now. Earlier, we only heard about production being down, but not deliveries being down. James says this changes things for me from a forecast perspective for Q3. Tesla investment relations appear to be trying to lower expectations for both deliveries and production heading into the end of the quarter. This may suggest that they won't be as aggressive on price to hit a volume target, which in a way possibly could be good news for Tesla stock in the short term, but bad news if the deliveries actually turn out to be lower than expected. Maybe they think they will let Q3 be the bad news quarter and then bounce back in Q4 with the refresh Model 3 Highland at higher average selling price and margin and set a low bar for a big quarter-over-quarter delivery beat. Jeff is questioning how credible is this report, but James insists that this sounds very credible to him. I think James has a point. I also saw a lot of people saying that this is no news, that this was already explained on the last earnings call. If you read the transcript of the call and if you listen to it very carefully, it said nothing about lower deliveries. It just only said that production could be lower. And because there was a significant amount of inventory, supposedly the deliveries could have still been higher than that of the previous quarter's deliveries. But maybe even Tesla was not planning to launch the refresh Model 3 so soon, which basically slows down the old Model 3 production, deliveries, and sales. Currently in China, they are producing them, but you can't take delivery of these new vehicles until October. So that doesn't really change much for me because Tesla is just moving things from one quarter to another. Overall, if you look at the long-term perspective, this doesn't mean much. It's just a short-term fluctuation, basically. But some investors that have a shorter time horizon, they will be freaking out about this. That is specifically if you look at only the quarterly deliveries. But then these same people could be really happy in Q4 because it seems like Q4 could be a big delivery beat. The Tesla Model Y became the second best-selling car overall in the UK in August, only 24 units off the #1 spot. Supposedly, Tesla's Model Y inventory in the US in blue here is up a lot recently, but I think James has a good point here. I don't put much weight into these inventory vehicle trackers anymore since Tesla showed us that they started to try and interfere with it, and that was a very active show of interference. One of these was shut down completely, basically. But if this is directionally accurate and heading into the meat of September for deliveries, Tesla will cut price on Model Y soon. So if we see price cuts, then we know, okay, yeah, we can still trust these inventory trackers. James just made a comment about Giga Mexico being delayed and possibly a new factory being built in China later. He agrees with Troy. China makes sense because the market is huge, they can build it fast, they can easily export to Asia and Europe, but this also made sense a year ago. Why the holdup on a new Chinese factory? Maybe something political going on. Also, if you watched every single video of mine this year, then you know that there were rumors about 2 different locations in China that were selected possibly or that were being discussed with Tesla for their next factory location in China, and that had nothing to do with Giga Shanghai. So maybe Tesla has been working on this secretly behind the scenes, we just haven't heard more about it. Ray is estimating that Tesla got 50,000 pre-orders for the refresh Model 3, which would be quite impressive because no one has been able to test drive the new Model 3. At least if you are just a regular Tesla customer, you can't test drive it yet. Some good news, Honda and Acura announced today that it has reached an agreement with Tesla to adopt Tesla's North American charging standard for the charging port of its EV models that will go on sale in North America starting from 2025. Drive Tesla Canada is reporting that Tesla added a blind spot indicator to the refresh Model 3. You can see right here that it is activated right now. This is this little reddish light, and now it's off. In the menus, you can also just turn it off if you don't want it. We know that Tesla has been having some issues recently hiring in Giga Berlin, but the next step is a shuttle from Berlin downtown directly into the new factory. This comes right after that Giga Berlin train launch. So this is good news. Gary just shared his Cybertruck expectations for final specs and pricing. He says, my guess is they start with quad motor deliveries first since initial startup costs will be high, then go to dual motor and then single motor. But Matthew says, I'm projecting there won't be a single motor or a quad motor. They will start with a dual and add a tri-motor later, I guess he's saying. And then he expands here, as far as I've seen, the VINs of the Cybertrucks cruising around have indicated dual motor. One VIN indicated a single motor, but I don't think single motor is happening based on discussions with the Tesla engineers. Sawyer, though, disagrees with Gary Black. He says, my Cybertruck estimates for final specs and pricing are dual motor, 350 miles of range and $65,000. for the starting price, which is 5,000 above what Gary has for his estimate, but Sawyer expects it to have more range, 50 miles more range. And then the tri-motor, he says, will have 420 miles of range and will start at $80,000. Sawyer thinks we will start with a dual motor. He also thinks that there's not going to be a quad motor. Sawyer says, since Plaid and Semi went tri-motor, I think quad is overkill. Elon also hasn't really mentioned the quad in a very long time. I think Sawyer and Matthew are closer to the truth here than Gary. It's just weird that supposedly Tesla will start with a dual motor. You would think Tesla would start with the highest configuration because that cost the most money to the consumer, so probably the margins would also be the highest. And also, when people review your product, you want them to review the highest spec version, because that way you crush all of the reviews, you exceed expectations, it's really fast, it has a lot of range, etc, etc, etc. But if Tesla has a shortage of batteries right now that they can put into the Cybertruck, then it might make more sense to go with a dual motor first instead of a higher spec version, because the range probably is going to be lower as well on the lower spec version. But even if there's a shortage of batteries, you just price the higher spec vehicle at a higher price and you should basically end up making the same amount, if not more, perhaps even, for every battery that goes into that Cybertruck. You would have fewer Cybertrucks on the road, but you would still be making possibly more money in total from each Cybertruck. Tesla just updated its wording on its website. Instead of saying potential savings, it now says probable savings. Also, if you scroll down a little bit lower here, it says not all customers qualify for the $7,500 tax credit. Tesla has dropped the amount a Model X and Model S buyer get when using a referral code to $500, down from $1,000. The referrer also now only gets 10,000 credits for referring a Model S and X, down from 20,000 credits. This makes sense because Tesla has just cut the prices significantly of these two vehicles. James has a pretty good point about the recent shutdown of the Giga Texas. While production may be halted, employee production lot is at capacity, implying perhaps some training occurring inside. This highlights a potential problem with the Cybertruck. Keep in mind, this is still a release candidate, so likely this is going to be fixed. If your Cybertruck has this, you might find it a little bit difficult to park when you have to charge. Whoever parked the Cybertruck could have parked not this closely, it would have been still fine, but you can see that the cable is not, well, you couldn't have really parked that much further than this guy did. The cable would still really have no problem reaching a charging port that was even further, but this guy parked really close. So maybe ideally, if it's somehow at all possible to bring the charging port just a little bit closer to the back of the vehicle, that would make everything just maybe a little bit easier. It does appear that whoever parked this Cybertruck was trying really hard. Again, I don't think it's a problem, but it would be a bit nicer to have that charging port a bit closer to the charger. If you didn't know, Sawyer went all in on Tesla stock 5 years ago, and he thinks that Tesla's success is still just beginning. Could Tesla be making a major investment in Canada, specifically in Quebec, soon? Yesterday, the Minister of Economy, Innovation and Energy said he would announce the largest investment ever in Quebec in the next 3 to 4 weeks. That means it'll be bigger than the $1.2 billion that Ford is investing for their battery plant. When asked if it will be a cell-making plant or something else, he replied, amongst other things, we'll talk about it when it comes. However, it seems that it is not going to be Tesla. Here's some good Tesla stock news. The Audi e-tron can now be purchased at a 50% discount if you are an Audi employee. And it is not going to be produced anymore in China. Here's another Tesla killer. I received the email to convert my Blazer EV pre-order into an order. But this guy thought that it is a $40,000 car, but his net price came to $58,000. $100,000. There is perhaps some hope that the US will also unexpectedly cut interest rates. For example, Poland's central bank just unexpectedly cut interest rates by 0.75%. That's a huge cut. Lower interest rates would be quite bullish for Tesla. Ford has unveiled the 2024 Mustang Mach-E Rally. It's not exactly clear why they made this as Sawyer, and Ford says it will start around $65,000, which is $10,500 more than a Model Y Performance. Also, the Mach-E does not qualify for the full $7,500 EV tax credit. It only qualifies for half of that. The Volkswagen CEO just said the Chinese have learned to build cars in recent decades. However, the established European manufacturers still have advantages in comparison. We have the vehicle know-how, we have the quality level, we have a brand heritage. The new ones don't have that. Now, another thing that Volkswagen has that, for example, BYD doesn't, is a lower number of sales in China of purely BEV vehicles. And not just in China, but global BEV sales. In the meantime, some of the most important political figures in Germany just visited the Tesla booth at the IAA. And they are all smiling. The chancellor seems to be fairly happy with what he sees. Tesla should really make a change here. If you buy a Model 3 or Y air filter, well, you may just want to buy one, right? But if you scroll down here and you read this little note, which says sold individually, 2 required for replacement, well, you'll be not exactly happy if you find out about that after you order just one. It's probably a good idea to sell them in pairs only then. And there's someone who actually bought just one, and then a service guy came to replace his filter and said you need 2, but luckily the service guy had another one on hand. And YouTube says you should watch this video next, but if you haven't finished watching this Elon Musk interview, watch this one next. My name is Matt Posius. Like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you so much for watching.